Hello everyone, my name is Benjamin Munji and I'm here to defend my article, The Origin of Thinking, Can Computers Think? In this document, I will attempt to answer two of the most debated questions in AI. Can computers think? And could we ever have a computer that can think? I do not claim to resolve this debate, for it has spanned decades and has failed even the greatest minds to settle. But I aim to present my findings like all my predecessors, share my perspective, and invite you to form your own judgment. And I'm going to be using the case scenario of my AI agent, Sephora, which is simply a digital pharmacist assistant for now that is supposed to prescribe medication and drugs based on reported signs and symptoms. And I think my AI would be particularly useful in rural areas that are that have semi or unskilled labor. And let us jump into the first question. Can computers think? Alan Turing in 1950 proposed the imitation game, and which was later known as the Turing test, where an interrogator must distinguish between a human and a machine through questioning. If the machine can convincingly imitate human responses, Turing argued we could meaningfully say that it thinks. For example, if Sephora, my AI agent, can predict the right prescription exactly like a human would, does the thought really matter that much? And then I posed the question, an interesting question, I think. If we made computers capable of thinking like humans, doesn't that just become imitation? Is imitation considered thinking? And John Searle, in reply to Alan Turing in 1980, argued against the Turing test with a Chinese room thought experiment. He showed that a person could manipulate Chinese symbols without understanding them, just as computers follow rules without genuine comprehension. Thus, computers may simulate understanding but do not truly think. This was Searle's way of saying that strong AI, i.e., machines that actually think like humans, is not possible if all they do is manipulate symbols. And so to counter Searle's argument was the robot reply by Dennett and others. They argued that if a computer were placed in a robot with sensors and the ability to interact with the world, its symbols would be grounded in real experiences, giving it genuine understanding. For example, if Sephora were given a sensor and a camera and maybe a speaker and a microphone, it would listen, it would observe, and it will give a prescription based on something that has actually experienced, an actual experience. So the robot reply assumes the computer genuinely understands what it is prescribing. But Searle countered that even then, the system would still only be manipulating symbols without true comprehension. And we have another argument, the frame problem, which was first identified in the 1960s by John McCarthy and Patrick Hayes, two pioneers of AI. It arose in trying to formalize common sense reasoning for AI. It begs the question, how does a system decide what is relevant in a situation without considering an infinite number of irrelevant possibilities? Humans can instinctively solve this problem, but it will be quite difficult for AI. For example, I would have to program Sephora to only consider relevant signs and symptoms when prescribing a drug, something a human can do naturally. And that brings, I'm probably not going to give my take right now. I'll give it at the end. Let us move to the next question, which is, could we ever have a computer that is able to think? And my arguments were, for example, I think let's start with John Searle, who was adamant that who was adamant that no matter how advanced strong AI becomes, it will never truly think. In his view, thinking is a unique quality that is reserved for biological beings. Computers, no matter how sophisticated, merely manipulate symbols based on formal rules, and that means they lack understanding, intentionality, and consciousness. For Searle, for Searle, genuine thought requires more computation. It demands It's genuine thought requires more than just computation. It demands a mind grounded in biological processes. So, in simple terms, Sia was simply saying thinking is for biological beings, and that is it. No one else can think as long as you are not formed by, you are not made up of biological components. And so the robot reply suggests that Another argument is that the robot reply suggests that if a machine like Sephora were embodied with sensors and the ability to interact with the world, its symbols could be grounded in real experience. In real experience. In this view, genuine thinking becomes possible through physical interaction and not just computation. But like I said in the previous question, critics argue that embodiment alone isn't enough. Just because an AI can interact with the world doesn't mean it understands those experiences. True understanding, they claim, requires more than sensory input. It demands subjective awareness, something machines may never possess. Another argument was Alan Turing. Alan Turing argued that if a machine like Sephora can prescribe drugs with the same accuracy and professionalism as a human, then we need not concern ourselves with whether it thinks. So he was trying to divert away from the question. But if we treat compute, but I asked the question, in fact, I posed this question. If we treat computers merely as parrots that mimic human outputs, we risk limiting their potential. By confining AI to imitation, we may be holding back systems like Sephora from reaching capabilities beyond our imagination, perhaps even surpassing human expertise in ways we haven't yet conceived. And my final argument is a consciousness debate. It says that even if we were successful in giving a program a body, for example, a robot's reply, surely this isn't enough to claim that a computer is conscious. If we program AI like Sephora to answer questions in ways we expect, how can we be certain it is self-aware when we ask it? And if it isn't self-aware, then it doesn't truly think. Like humans acting on instinct, it would merely be following predefined instructions to make decisions. For example, if you ask ChatGPT the question, are you conscious? It will tell you, no, I am not conscious. Because it has been programmed to say that it is not conscious. It's not something that you can willingly answer. Someone has to program it to answer. And so if we can never get an answer out of AI that is not programmed like that, then will computers ever really be able to think? And so this brings us to a conclusion. This article suggests that a more meaningful question than can computers think is, what does thinking actually involve? It reminds us that it reminds us how little we truly understand about the nature of thought itself. Because of that, we struggle to answer the first question with any certainty, which is, can computers think? Still, I believe that one day, as technology advances and as we gain a deeper understanding of the human brain, someone will be able to answer it. Perhaps maybe, for example, I'm sure right now we cannot answer it, and we cannot imagine, but surely one day. Thank you so much.